names and high-priority guys that Michigan has still a legitimate chance at in this class?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is Damian Harris, the running back out of Berea, Kentucky, a former Michigan commit. He's a 5-star. He's the number 4 player in the country. This kid is the real deal. He decommitted from Michigan because his best relationship with the Michigan coaching staff was with offensive coordinator Al Borges. When Borges was fired, Harris took a few days and said, you know what, I'm going to reopen things, take another look at the recruiting process, and consider all my options. Those options now include Alabama, Ohio State, Kentucky, among several others. So this kid's a big-timer, and he's going to have pretty much any offer that he wants when it comes down to it. But he did grow up a Michigan fan. Obviously, that Michigan connection has been there, and the Wolverines will really want to convince him that he would like to return to the maize and blue fold. I think another kid to look at who actually ended up visiting over the weekend is Chris Clark, a tight end out of Old Farm School in Avon, Connecticut. 6'6", 245-pounder. He's one of the best tight ends in the country, probably the best offer list of all the tight ends in the country. And a kid that I think Michigan will have a great shot at now that he's visited. He really liked it. Was committed to North Carolina, but it looks like Michigan and Ohio State and probably Notre Dame will be there until the end. And he's another kid that Michigan fans should get really excited about.
Well, we know Damian Harris is the real deal. Everyone is big on him. Another running back that seems to be very interested in Michigan, though, is Michael Weber from Cass Tech. What kind of a runner is he?
Yeah, Weber is kind of a zone-style runner. He's a one-cut-and-go kind of guy. During his junior year, he managed to show much more power because his offensive line wasn't as amazing as it had been when he was a sophomore. Last year, he was running behind David Dawson, who ended up at Michigan, obviously, Dennis Finley, who went to Michigan State, Kenton Gibbs, who went to NC State. This year, it was more guys who were a year younger than him, maybe some guys stepping in for the first time. And Weber responded very well. He showed that he can run over a couple guys when the holes aren't there. He has always had great speed. He's kind of a track guy who has built up to become a football player. He's probably about 5'10" and maybe 215 pounds at this point, so he has the mass to be that type of player. He's not going to juke you out of your shoes like Harris is able to do, which is probably the thing that Harris does best that Weber can't yet do, because otherwise they're pretty similar backs, great speed, good power, and the ability to find holes and run through them.
Has Michigan offered him, or is he just interested at this point?
Yeah, Michigan offered Weber. Michigan was one of the first schools to offer him, and he was one of the first players in the 2015 class that they offered. They offered him back last February, so about 14 months ago. And he's a kid that was very high in Michigan, grew up a big Michigan fan. His family is full of big Michigan fans. But when Harris was committed to Michigan, Weber was kind of a back burner prospect for the Wolverines. And since they lost Harris, Weber is back in the forefront of their minds. And I think he's really taking kindly to that because he likes Michigan a lot, and he just wants to be shown that love. And I think if Michigan really wants to continue pursuing him, I would expect him to end up at least strongly considering Michigan, if not ending up in Ann Arbor.
Our guest here on Michigan Game Day this week, as we update the 2015 recruiting process, is recruiting editor Tim Sullivan from the Wolverine. Tim, excluding attrition with this upcoming class, and that's always a tough thing to call, how many scholarships is Michigan going to give out this year?
The class is going to start very small. I think the number right now is about 13. They're obviously going to end up with more than that. As you mentioned, there's attrition every year. I think there's an average of 4 to 6 players each off season, so you'll see that class grow maybe about 17 to 19 guys, probably on the smaller end of that, because Brady Hoke and his staff have done one of the best jobs of retaining talent that I've seen in a long time. You saw obviously much more attrition year to year under the previous coaching staff than you do under the current coaching staff. So if it gets to maybe 16 to 18, that would probably be a good estimate at this point, and that would allow Michigan to fill all their needs and get probably a couple players that, not necessarily luxury players, but once they fill all their needs, shooting for the stars with the last couple spots.
We got used to, in the first couple of years with Coach Hoke, early commitments. It seemed like by spring, more than half of the class was filled. And right now, there are only 5 hard commits this year for the class of 2015. Is there any concern that we only have those 5 commits at this point in the season?
I would say there's a little bit of concern only because Michigan has already lost to not only Harris, but a fellow 5-star wide receiver, George Campbell, out of Tarpon Springs, Florida, a teammate of now Michigan freshman offensive lineman Mason Cole. So the fact that they've kind of gone backwards at times is a little worrisome. However, they're not as focused on wrapping guys up early as they had been in previous years. I think in 2012 and 2013 especially, and also quite a bit last year, but not quite as much. They wanted to fill the needs that they had, make sure that they had bodies in those positions. Now, offensive line was obviously the biggest need probably for those 2012 and 2013 classes, and they filled all their offensive line spots pretty much as quickly as any spot on the field. So once they got those, they were able to kind of focus on picking up the top-end talent. And this year, most of their needs are filled. The depth on the roster is pretty good, so they can aim for the stars a little bit more overall. They do have some needs still. Obviously, running back is one of them, but they have Harris and Weber highly interested, and those guys don't plan to make early decisions, so they can wait for those guys. Same sort of thing at wide receiver where they have some need, not a great need, but they have some highly talented prospects interested who are planning to wait, and they're willing to wait for those guys too. They're not going to try and pressure anybody into an early commitment just so that they can, have their name on that commitment list and make it look a little bit better in April. They're more concerned about what it looks like next February.
Well, Tim, history to most of these recruits is, of course, at their age, what happened last year or the year before with the program. Given that, is Brady losing some edge in these recruiting wars because of the lack of success on the field the last 2 years?
I would say that they're not necessarily losing steam, but there is something to be said for not having the rebuilding sales pitch to give to a kid. If a five-star kid is looking at a school that went 7-6 last year, it's one thing. If that school went 4-8 the previous year, you can say that they're building. Now, Michigan went 11-2 a couple of years ago, so it seems like there's a bit of a decline, and I think at this point some kids are going to want to see it on the field this fall before they really think about committing, and I think maybe Harris is one of those kids, and some of the other top kids that they're in on want to say, you know what, Michigan is on the table, but I'm going to be a little more patient to see if they're going to be the Michigan that my parents told me about or the Michigan that I've been a little worried about over the past maybe 7 or 8 years, other than that great year in 2011.
Is Michigan getting some interest from kids that they normally wouldn't because of the Nussmeier hire? And it might be early in the 2015 class to see a bump up from that, but maybe looking forward to 2016?
I think the 2015 class is a kid that they didn't get in Josh Rosen, the number one quarterback in the country, who ended up committing to UCLA. But I think if Michigan didn't hire Doug Nussmeier, Rosen wouldn't have been as interested in Michigan as he was, and I think Michigan did come in second to UCLA. So that's something that really helps them with the Nussmeier hire. I think hiring Nussmeier is going to be more of the same sort of thing that I just mentioned. People will want to see it on the field. Now, obviously, Nussmeier did coordinate two of the best Alabama offenses of the past couple decades over the last 2 years, but kids who have seen the Nussmeier hire like him on a personal basis. They want to see Michigan prove it on the field. They want to see an offensive line that can block, and they want to see wide receivers out there catching the ball, running backs running with it successfully before they really commit to anything in terms of what Nussmeier means for their interest in Michigan.
What about the class of 2016, Tim? I know it's we get ahead of ourselves in these recruiting wars. I guess we have to. You have to stay on top of it. But any names that have jumped out at you in that class that have Michigan interest?
Yeah, there are two kids in the state of Michigan that have been offered, and I think Michigan is in great shape with both of them. The first one is Theo Lacusa out of Traverse City West High School, a 6'5", 300-pound offensive lineman. He visited Michigan in February and told me coming into the visit that he was thinking he might commit on that trip. I think the Michigan coaching staff said, look, we're 2 years away from your signing day. You need to get out and see the world a little bit. We want to make sure that once you commit to Michigan, you're not going to suddenly say, oh, I wish I'd visited USC, or oh, I wish I'd visited Florida State. Once you see the things that you think you need to see in the process, come back to us, and then we'll accept your commitment. Then the other one is Dalen Hayes out of Orchard Lake St. Mary's, which is obviously a school that's been very kind to Michigan. A 6'3", 225-pound linebacker. Another kid that I think was very close to committing to Michigan. At this weekend's Rivals Camp Series, he was planning to make his commitment, and I think Michigan would have been that choice. However, he's kind of taken a step back as well. He wants to see a couple other schools. Wisconsin offered him last week, so he wants to see Wisconsin before he really thinks about completely ending his recruiting process. But I do think that when all is said and done, Michigan will still be in great shape with him. And then there are some national players. Isaac Nauta out of Buford, Georgia, is a great player. Had an uncle, Joel Smingy, who played for Greg Madison at Western Michigan back in the 80s, a kid that's going to be a 5-star tight end. Eric Swenson out of Downers Grove, Illinois, already committed to Michigan, an offensive lineman and a potential high 4-star, maybe 5-star kid. So I think the 2016 class is off to almost as strong a start as the 2015 class when you consider the kids who have very high interest in Michigan.
Well, there you go, Michigan fans. Everyone's. I think I get more email, Tim, about recruiting. It never ends. So there's our update for right now. And our guest today has been recruiting editor Tim Sullivan from the Wolverine. And of course, on the show, I'm trying to do a monthly update on recruiting because it is such a hot button with fans. So I'm sure we'll get you back on soon, Tim. But one quick question for you. Spring football, of course, wrapped up. We've got, guys taking a little bit of time off and then conditioning, 7-on-7 drills in the summer. What are your early thoughts right now on the upcoming season? Does your gut tell you this is going to be a bounce-back year?
I think it will be a bounce-back year just because it seemed like 2013 was a year where almost everything that could have gone wrong did, except in that Northwestern game where Michigan did get those lucky breaks. There were so many games where they didn't. In the Nebraska game, for example, they were a couple plays away from winning. Even the Ohio State game, they were a couple plays away from winning. I think that this year, even if the good luck factor evens out and just gets to the complete national average, whatever that would mean, I think that Michigan would have a chance to bounce back. The thing is, they have such a tougher schedule with Michigan State, Notre Dame, and Ohio State on the road that even if the team improves quite a bit, the record will only improve incrementally unless they really, really step it up and maybe catch some of those good breaks.
Okay, recruiting fanatics, don't forget, if you want to keep up on everything that's going on, and again, it never ends, make sure you subscribe to the Wolverine magazine or thewolverine.com and follow Tim Sullivan and the excellent job that he does on the recruiting trail for the Wolverine. So, Tim, I'm sure we'll have you on this summer. Thanks again for your time.
Yep, thanks for having me on, Mike.
On our fan feedback segment this week, Matt from Paris, Michigan called our listener line with his very short and very succinct thoughts on what has to change for Michigan football this season.
Hello, this is Matt Graham, Paris, Michigan. Going back about the success of the 2014 Michigan team, the offensive line has to improve. The offensive line doesn't block. It doesn't matter who the quarterback, running back, or wide receivers are.
Thanks again to Matt from Paris, Michigan for calling our listener line this week. You too can give us a call with any of your Maize and Blue thoughts or opinions. My listener line is open 24/7 to call and record your thoughts at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Just tell us who you are, where you're calling from, and then give us your 2 cents worth. You can also email us at the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. So come on, Wolverine fans. I would love to hear from more of you. And who knows, just like Matt, you might hear yourself on an upcoming show. Coming up next, we wrap the show up for another week with Wolverine Quick Hits here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits this week, following an intentional walk to sophomore Sierra Romero in the 5th inning, senior cleanup hitter Caitlin Blanchard drilled a 3-run double into center field, breaking a 1-1 tie in the number 3 ranked University of Michigan softball team's 7-2 victory over number 12 ranked Minnesota on Sunday at the Wilpon Complex. Blanchard's double put Michigan up 4-1, providing the first 3-run lead of the series. Runs were hard to come by in the first 2 games of the series due to some outstanding pitching performances from both teams. 1-0 Minnesota win on Friday, 3-1 Michigan win on Saturday. With her double, Blanchard is now 8-for-11 with 15 runs batted in following an intentional walk to Romero. 3 batters after Blanchard, junior Lauren Sweet provided the exclamation point to the inning with a 3-run homer to center field. In all, Michigan sent 9 batters to the plate in the 5th and scored 6 runs to take a 7-1 lead. Freshman pitcher Megan Betza showed flashes of dominance, striking out 11 Golden Gophers, including a stretch of 5 in a row between the 4th and 5th innings. The righty no-hit Minnesota threw 4.2 innings before Sam Mackern hit a homer in the 5th. In fact, the only other hit off Betza was a second solo shot by Erica Meyer in the 6th. So the Wolverines, again ranked number 3, heading into this week's play, have an overall record of 36-7 14-1, sole possession of first place in the Big Ten. The University of Michigan